"I can't believe it's really you," Logan whispered under his breath, his heart thudding as he stepped through the automatic doors of the bustling downtown cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint scent of pastries. His eyes immediately found her, Clara Bennett, standing near the corner with a small child perched on her hip, laughing and reaching for a cookie on the counter. Time had not been kind to them in the way he had imagined. Clara still carried herself with that quiet grace, yet there was a subtle weariness around her eyes that made his chest tighten. Olivia, the little girl with curly golden hair and bright hazel eyes, reminded him of something he couldn't quite place at first, until the memory hit him like a wave. Those eyes, that smile, it had to be impossible. He took a cautious step closer, careful not to draw attention yet unable to look away. Memories of a decade ago, of promises unkept and a love paused too soon, crashed into him with every heartbeat. Clara glanced down at Olivia, her expression softening as the child babbled about something trivial but utterly absorbing, and Logan's throat went dry. He hadn't expected to see her with a child, and the thought that she might have kept this secret, that she might have carried on without him, made the world around him feel suddenly too small, too loud, too impossible to navigate. Every instinct screamed for him to speak, to demand an explanation, but he held back, uncertain of how to breach the gap that years of silence had carved between them. The cafe was filled with the hum of conversation and clinking cups, a mundane soundtrack to the storm raging inside him. Clara bent down to adjust Olivia's tiny shoes, her fingers brushing over the straps, and Logan felt a pang of something he hadn't named in years: regret, longing, fear, all tangled together. He watched as Olivia turned toward him, a curious tilt of her head that made his heart seize, and she waved shyly, unaware of the magnitude of the man watching them. Logan's chest tightened, his mind racing through possibilities and worst-case scenarios. Could she be his daughter? The timing, the details, the way she laughed, it all aligned too perfectly to dismiss. He swallowed hard, fighting to compose himself, to mask the whirlwind of emotions threatening to spill over. Clara finally looked up, and their eyes met for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, a mixture of surprise, caution, and something else, something that stirred a familiar ache deep within him. Logan knew in that moment that this encounter was no accident, it was fate demanding a reckoning. The child in her arms reached out with tiny fingers, and Logan felt a jolt of realization so sharp it left him momentarily breathless. He was too late for many things, but this child, this living, breathing piece of their past, was here, undeniable and unyielding. He had to know, had to understand, had to bridge the years with words he barely dared to speak. The bustling cafe, the chatter, the clinking cups faded into the background as all his focus narrowed to Clara and the little girl who held their shared history in her laughter. Logan took another step forward, heart pounding, courage trembling on the edge of certainty, and whispered her name, fragile yet full of urgency, hoping against hope that the years apart had not completely erased the bond they once shared. Logan stood near the counter, his eyes fixed on Clara as she guided Olivia to a small table, laughter spilling from the little girl like sunlight through the windows. He felt a mix of disbelief and longing, his mind replaying memories from years ago when life had pulled them apart, and he had never imagined seeing her in this context, a mother with a child. He watched as Olivia reached for a glass of milk, her tiny fingers wrapping around it with determination, and a pang of emotion surged through him, a combination of awe and fear that he might be too late to claim any part of their shared past. Clara's movements were careful, almost protective, and yet there was a calmness to her demeanor that told him she had built a life capable of weathering storms without him. He felt a lump in his throat as he observed them, realizing that every decision, every moment he had missed, had led them here, and the reality was almost too overwhelming to process. He inched closer under the guise of needing coffee, each step measured as if proximity could somehow give him insight into the truths hidden in their years apart. His gaze shifted repeatedly to Olivia, noticing small details that tugged at his heart, her smile, the way she scrunched her nose when she laughed, movements that seemed uncannily familiar, and he wondered if the universe had placed her in front of him to force acknowledgement of what he had ignored for far too long. Clara glanced up at the sound of the espresso machine, her expression soft yet cautious, and Logan could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken words lingering like a tangible presence between them. He knew he could not rush her, could not demand answers, and yet the urge to speak, to explain, to understand, consumed him from within. Logan's eyes followed her every gesture, cataloguing movements, inflections, tiny quirks that once were etched into his memory, and now they felt both familiar and painfully distant. As Olivia clapped her hands and looked toward the window, Logan's attention was momentarily drawn outside, imagining how different the past could have been if circumstances had aligned differently, and how fragile yet resilient the life Clara had built truly was. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and regret, a desire to step forward and bridge the years of separation, yet uncertainty anchored his feet, as if speaking too soon could shatter the delicate balance of the present. Logan noticed Clara adjusting Olivia's jacket as they prepared to leave, the little girl's hand brushing against her mother's cheek in a tender, instinctive gesture, and a realization struck him with quiet force. This bond, this routine, had been nurtured in his absence, and he was merely an observer at this moment, witnessing a world he could no longer take for granted. His heartbeat quickened as he debated internally whether to approach, whether to risk intrusion into a life that had carried on without him, and yet the connection, subtle but undeniable, pulled him forward. The cafe buzzed around him, oblivious to the emotional tempest contained within Logan's chest. As he watched Clara and Olivia move toward the door, each step highlighting the years he had missed, and each breath he took reminded him that the time to act, the time to speak, might be slipping away faster than he could comprehend. Logan gathered his courage, preparing to call her name, to start a conversation that could change the trajectory of all their lives, and for a moment, he felt the weight of the years lift, replaced with the acute awareness that some truths, no matter how delayed, demanded recognition before it was too late. Logan followed Clara and Olivia outside, careful to maintain a distance that would not startle them, yet close enough to keep them in sight as they navigated the bustling streets filled with honking cars and pedestrians hustling to their destinations. His mind was a storm of questions and possibilities, each one more urgent than the last, and he could not shake the feeling that every step they took was a reminder of time lost and opportunities missed. Clara adjusted Olivia's tiny backpack, straightening the straps and checking the zipper, and Logan noticed the precision of her movements, the care she invested in every small action, as if preparing the child for a world that might not always be gentle. The little girl skipped ahead, her laughter ringing out as she chased after a pigeon, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air between the adults, and Logan's chest tightened at the sight. He wanted to reach out, to speak, to bridge the gap, yet he hesitated, unsure how to approach without alarming her, uncertain how to speak words that had been unspoken for years. Logan's thoughts drifted to what she might think of him now, the man who had vanished from her life without explanation, and a wave of guilt swept through him, nearly overwhelming his ability to breathe. He observed the way Clara glanced over her shoulder, scanning the streets with a protective vigilance, and he realized how much she had endured alone, raising Olivia with strength and grace, and a quiet resilience that he had never fully appreciated before. Every detail of the little girl, from the curl of her hair to the bright spark in her eyes, seemed to speak to him directly, hinting at a connection that he had not allowed himself to fully confront until this moment. Logan's heart raced as he considered stepping forward, yet he felt the weight of uncertainty, the fear that his presence could disrupt a fragile balance Clara had established. He watched as they stopped at a small crosswalk, Clara crouching down to hold Olivia's hand as the signal changed, and the sight struck him with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. Life had moved on, yet here he was, witnessing a chapter that belonged to him as well, if he could only find a way back in. Logan took a deep breath, trying to steady the torrent of emotion surging through him, and resolved to approach carefully, to offer a word or a gesture that could open a door rather than slam it shut. The bustling city moved around them, yet Logan felt a stillness, a focus that narrowed everything to the two of them, the child, and the unspoken truths hanging between them. His eyes lingered on Clara's face, noting the faint lines of worry, the softness in her expression when Olivia giggled, and he realized that this was the moment that could define what came next, whether he would remain a distant observer or step forward to claim a place in a life that had been waiting, unknowingly, for him. Logan's feet shifted, a careful, tentative movement forward, as he rehearsed in his mind the words he might say, the questions he might ask, and the gestures that could convey his intentions without fear or pressure. He could see the rhythm of their walk, the casual gestures of mother and daughter, and he understood that every moment counted, that the right approach could change everything, and he knew that he could not afford to waste another heartbeat in hesitation. Logan finally reached a position where he could safely step into their path without startling them, his heart pounding in his chest as he rehearsed the simplest words that could begin a conversation. Clara bent down slightly, holding Olivia's hand as they waited for a red light to turn green, and Logan could not help but notice the familiar curve of her smile when she whispered something to the child, a softness that made the years apart feel both endless and immediate all at once. He caught Olivia's gaze, the little girl's hazel eyes locking with his for just a moment, and the flicker of recognition that passed through them hit him with unexpected force, like a puzzle piece falling into place. Logan cleared his throat softly, careful to sound casual, and said, "Clara." His voice trembled just enough to betray the depth of emotion behind the single word, and he saw her pause, a subtle stiffening of her shoulders, as though she had been expecting a stranger but not him. Clara looked up fully, her eyes widening slightly, and Logan felt an ache twist in his chest at the mixture of surprise and guarded caution reflected in her expression. Olivia tugged at Clara's sleeve, giggling and pointing at a passing dog, oblivious to the tension, and Logan felt a pang of longing mixed with a quiet admiration for the effortless bond they shared. "Logan," Clara said finally, her voice steady yet tinged with disbelief, and the sound of his name from her lips felt like both a bridge and a barrier, an acknowledgement of the past that was both painful and necessary. He nodded, swallowing hard, and said, "It has been a long time. I did not expect to see you here." Her eyes searched his for unspoken meaning, scanning for the man she thought had vanished from her life, and Logan realized that every subtle movement, every shift in her expression, carried weight, as though each detail might reveal whether there was still a place for him in this moment, in their lives. Olivia, sensing the seriousness in their conversation but unaware of its complexity, reached for Logan's hand tentatively, and he froze, caught between hesitation and desire to connect. Clara's eye softened just enough to allow a glimmer of trust, yet she still held a subtle distance, a line Logan was not yet permitted to cross. He took a careful step closer, lowering his hand in acknowledgement of her boundaries, and said softly, "She is remarkable, Clara. Truly remarkable." Her gaze flickered between him and Olivia, a silent question lingering in the space between them, and Logan understood that words alone could not bridge the gap of years, but that this encounter, simple yet profound, had begun to open a path that might lead to understanding, connection, and a chance to reconcile the years they had lost. The light changed, and Clara led Olivia across the street, Logan following at a respectful distance, each step heavy with anticipation and unspoken emotions, knowing that the revelation of a truth long hidden was only the beginning of a journey neither of them could yet fully see. Logan kept pace with Clara and Olivia as they walked along the busy sidewalk, his eyes darting between them, cataloguing each small detail as if it could provide answers to questions he had not yet dared to ask. The little girl skipped ahead, her giggles carrying lightly in the spring air, and Logan could not help but notice the way her curls bounced with each step, the delicate rhythm of her movement that mirrored something familiar deep within him. Clara adjusted Olivia's jacket as a gentle breeze swept through the street, and Logan felt a surge of protective instinct mingled with a quiet reverence for the life she had built on her own. He hesitated, unsure how to bridge the distance between them, yet he knew that every second he waited risked losing the fragile opportunity before him. Finally, Logan took a careful breath and called her name again, this time with slightly more volume, hoping to pierce the veil of hesitation that seemed to separate them. Clara stopped and turned fully toward him, the little girl tugging at her hand as if sensing the tension in the moment, and Logan saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes that made his chest tighten. He stepped closer, hands relaxed and open, offering no threat, only a silent plea for understanding. "Clara, I know this is unexpected, but there is so much I need to say," he said, his voice carrying both urgency and vulnerability. Her gaze softened, yet the faint line of caution remained, an invisible barrier he was not yet permitted to cross. Olivia looked up at him curiously, and Logan felt a sudden, sharp pull of emotion, the realization that he was connected to this little life in a way that could not be denied. Clara took a deep breath, steadying herself, and Logan sensed the weight of unspoken words pressing down on both of them. He wanted to reach for Olivia, to gently touch her hand, to reassure himself that she was real, that the connection was undeniable, yet he held back, mindful of boundaries that had been established long before he returned. The sounds of the city, the distant sirens, chatter of pedestrians, and hum of traffic, faded into the background as the intensity of the moment consumed him. He knew that the coming minutes would determine whether he remained a distant observer or became a part of their lives again. Logan opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated, feeling the enormity of his own emotions mirrored in Clara's cautious expression. She finally nodded subtly, a tiny gesture of acknowledgement that encouraged him to continue, and Logan felt a flicker of hope, a possibility that the bridge he had longed to build for years might finally be crossed. Every heartbeat was loud in his ears as he took another step forward, careful to match her pace, careful not to overstep, and yet determined to show, in every small action, that he was here, that he had returned, and that the truth, however delayed, could no longer be denied. The city moved around them in a blur of color and motion, but for Logan, Clara, and Olivia, time seemed suspended, each step forward carrying the promise of discovery, connection, and the fragile beginnings of reconciliation. Logan's chest tightened as he watched Clara kneel down to speak with Olivia at the edge of the park, her voice gentle and filled with a warmth that seemed to radiate outward, capturing the little girl's full attention. Every detail of her posture, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, reminded him of the Clara he had known years ago, yet now tempered by the experiences of a life lived apart from him. Logan's gaze shifted to Olivia, and the clarity of realization hit him like a wave crashing against the shore. Every laugh, every expression, every movement mirrored a part of him he had not allowed himself to acknowledge until this very moment. The little girl reached for a flower growing at the edge of the walkway, her fingers brushing against the petals delicately, and Logan felt a pang of emotion so sharp it was almost unbearable. Clara looked up, catching his eyes again, and there was a flicker of something unspoken between them, a tension and recognition that neither of them had the courage to verbalize fully yet. Logan stepped forward slowly, the sound of gravel crunching beneath his shoes breaking the delicate silence, and Clara's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and guarded hesitation crossing her features. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low but steady, carrying the weight of years and unspoken truths. Clara's lips pressed together for a moment, and then she nodded, a subtle invitation for him to continue, and Logan felt a fragile thread of hope that this conversation could lead to understanding, to acknowledgement, to connection. He crouched slightly to be at a more approachable height, careful to remain non-threatening, and allowed his eyes to follow Olivia as she turned toward him with curiosity, sensing an unfamiliar presence yet drawn by a quiet energy she could not name. Logan's voice softened, and he spoke with deliberate care. "She is remarkable, Clara. Everything about her, it is familiar in a way that I cannot ignore." Clara's gaze lingered on Olivia, then returned to him, searching, questioning, yet slowly the lines of tension in her face began to ease as she perceived his sincerity. Logan felt his throat tighten as he continued, his words faltering only slightly. I have realized that she is mine. That she carries a part of both of us, something I never wanted to miss, and yet here she is, undeniably, before me." The moment hung in the air, heavy and charged, the sounds of distant children playing and dogs barking fading into insignificance compared to the gravity of the revelation. Clara's hand instinctively rested on Olivia's shoulder, a protective gesture, and Logan sensed both the barrier and the bridge it represented. She was guarding what he had longed for, yet also opening a path for him to step forward. Olivia's eyes met his again, unknowing yet profoundly affecting, and Logan felt a swell of emotion that was impossible to contain, a mixture of awe, love, and an aching regret for years lost. He stood taller, feeling the weight of truth settle between them, and knew that from this moment forward, nothing would be the same. The realization had been slow, unfolding in careful increments over the past steps and conversations, but now it was complete, undeniable, and utterly transformative, leaving Logan suspended between hope and the fear of what the next words, the next actions, might bring. Logan walked beside Clara and Olivia along the winding path of the city park, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the grassy expanse, and he felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him with both urgency and reverence. Every gesture Clara made, from adjusting Olivia's hair to guiding her tiny hand along the railing of a small bridge, spoke of the years she had spent nurturing and protecting, and Logan felt a profound mixture of admiration and regret, realizing how much he had missed. He wanted desperately to reach out, to bridge the silence of years with words that might convey the depth of his feelings, yet he remained careful, conscious of the boundaries that Clara had erected for herself and for Olivia. Logan slowed his pace, letting the little girl move ahead with a joyful skip, and spoke softly, almost a whisper, Clara, I understand if you do not want me here, but I cannot ignore this connection, not anymore." Her gaze flickered toward him, searching, cautious, and for a brief moment Logan thought she might turn away, but then she let out a small, measured sigh, a gesture of acknowledgement that stirred a fragile hope within him. Olivia turned to glance back at him, her curiosity bright and innocent, and Logan's heart swelled with a love he had not allowed himself to fully confront until now. Clara's lips pressed together, and Logan sensed the inner conflict she was wrestling with: years of independence, fear of disappointment, and the undeniable pull of emotions that had never fully faded. He took another step closer, careful to keep his hands visible and his demeanor non-threatening, and said, "She is extraordinary, Clara. She is you and yet somehow also me, and I cannot stand by." Without trying to understand, without trying to be part of her life. The wind rustled through the leaves above them, carrying the sounds of children playing in the distance, yet all Logan could focus on was the fragile triangle before him, the interplay of Clara's cautious hope, Olivia's innocent curiosity, and his own longing to belong. Clara finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "It has not been easy, Logan, to do this alone, to keep her safe, to make decisions without knowing where you would have been." Her words were heavy with unspoken history, yet in them was also a thread of invitation, a possibility that Logan could not ignore. He nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat, and said, "I know I cannot undo the past, but I can promise to be present, to do whatever it takes to support both of you." Olivia skipped back toward them, oblivious to the tension, and placed her small hand in Logan's, testing, smiling, and Logan felt a warmth spread through him, a confirmation that the bond was real, that the path forward, though uncertain, could begin with small, deliberate steps. Clara watched him carefully, her eyes softening just enough to show that she was weighing the possibility that she might allow him a place in their lives if he proved sincere, and Logan knew in that moment that patience, understanding, and gentle persistence were all he had to offer, yet they were also all that was necessary to begin mending the years of separation and forging a future none of them had dared to imagine. Logan walked alongside Clara and Olivia as they approached the small playground at the edge of the park, the late afternoon sun casting golden hues across the swings and slides. He kept his movements calm and deliberate, ensuring that neither Clara nor Olivia felt pressured or rushed, and yet every step he took was fueled by a quiet determination to be part of their lives. Olivia ran ahead to the swings, her laughter echoing through the air, and Logan felt a tug of emotion so strong it made his chest ache, knowing that this little girl held a part of him he could no longer ignore. Clara watched her daughter carefully, her hands hovering protectively. And Logan admired the grace and attentiveness she carried, the careful balance between independence and vigilance that had allowed her to manage everything on her own. He approached Clara, keeping his tone gentle. "I want to be here for both of you, in whatever way you need me to be." Her eyes met his, cautious yet searching, and for a moment the city around them faded, leaving only the delicate triangle of their shared presence. Olivia turned back from the swings, curiosity bright in her eyes, and Logan smiled softly, bending slightly to meet her gaze. "Hello, Olivia, may I push you on the swing?" The little girl hesitated for a moment, then nodded, a small act of trust that made Logan's heart swell. Clara's expression softened slightly, though a hint of worry lingered, and Logan understood that trust would have to be earned, not demanded. He guided Olivia gently onto the swing, her small hands gripping his fingers as he pushed lightly, careful to maintain a sense of fun and safety, and he watched her laughter bubble up, free and unguarded, and felt a profound connection solidify in that moment. Clara observed quietly, a small smile breaking through the careful mask she had maintained, and Logan knew that this simple interaction was a step toward something greater, a tentative bridge across the years they had lost. He continued to engage with Olivia, asking her about the colors of the flowers nearby, noticing her bright hazel eyes lighting up with excitement, and Clara found herself relaxing, seeing that his intentions were genuine, that he was committed to being a part of their shared world. Logan's heart swelled with cautious hope, each laugh, each gesture, each shared glance reinforcing the realization that he was no longer merely an observer but a participant in this small, precious family dynamic. The breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers, and Logan felt a sense of quiet resolve settle over him, knowing that while the road ahead would require patience, understanding, and gentle persistence, this afternoon marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where connection, trust, and love could slowly be rebuilt. Step by careful step, under the warm light of the setting sun. The sky above the park had turned a soft shade of amber as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows over the playground where Logan, Clara, and Olivia spent their afternoon. Logan held Olivia's hand as they walked toward a quiet bench near a cluster of blooming flowers, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension as he observed the gentle interaction between mother and daughter. Clara followed closely, her posture relaxed yet attentive, and Logan could sense the careful consideration she gave to every decision about how much space to allow him in their lives. Olivia skipped ahead momentarily, chasing a butterfly, and Logan's heart swelled with an overwhelming sense of connection, realizing that this small, exuberant child represented both the consequence of years lost and the promise of a future yet to be written. He glanced at Clara, noticing the subtle softness in her expression, the way her eyes lingered on Olivia with pride and protectiveness, and he felt a stirring of gratitude that she had allowed him to witness these moments, however cautiously. "Clara," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "I know I cannot change the past, but I want to be part of her life, and if you will allow it, part of yours as well." Her eyes searched his, a delicate tension hanging between them, and for a moment, neither spoke, both aware of the fragile potential in the words exchanged. Logan's gaze shifted to Olivia, whose curiosity drew her back to him with a smile, and he felt the undeniable pull of responsibility, love, and the deep desire to be present, to bridge the gap of years with patient understanding. Clara finally nodded slowly, a small but significant gesture, and Logan felt a surge of relief and cautious hope. It was an invitation, tentative yet genuine, that required care, respect, and commitment to honor. The city sounds around them, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of people walking by, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, faded into insignificance as the weight of the moment enveloped them. Logan squeezed Olivia's hand gently, a silent promise of presence and protection, and she giggled, the sound filling the space with warmth and possibility. Clara watched this interaction closely, her expression softening further, allowing a hint of trust to seep through the careful boundaries she had maintained, and Logan realized that the path forward would require patience, consistency, and gentle persistence, yet it was a path worth every effort. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the park, Logan felt a sense of quiet determination, knowing that the day marked a beginning rather than an end, a first step toward reconciliation, connection, and the creation of new memories together. Just as he was about to speak again, a figure appeared in the distance, someone from their shared past whose presence threatened to disrupt the fragile harmony they had begun to build, and Logan's heart skipped a beat, the afternoon that had felt so certain now tinged with the unexpected shadow of questions yet to be answered.